Continuing on with the series of Speaking with the Dead, this will be what we refer to as Chapter 3. So I think in Chapter 1, we talked about the necessity of really trusting openness, miracles, and a willingness to perceive in ways we haven't before. And in Chapter 2, we started to go deeper into the meatier topics, where we'll pick up today with Chapter 3. And there's a reason, again, that we're doing this in snippets and in chapters, because this is detail that may take a while to really listen to and allow it to seep into those cracks in the sidewalk. So each one is allowing an opportunity to slow down and maybe perhaps check in with yourself and see how you're doing as you're continuing on to the next chapter. So in Chapter 3, we're going to be talking about clearing the warehouse for new energy and what that looks like. It's really about being observant of all of what you believe to be your own thoughts. Those things thinking in what you also label as good or bad, and looking into the true nature of whatever thoughts may arise, neither tracing the past nor inviting the future, allowing any clinging to experiences of joy, nor being overcome by sad situations. In doing so, you will notice in the stillness in those cracks between the pavement, there is simply a state of what I look at as great equilibrium, where all good and bad, peace and distress are devoid of true identity. In this abyss of homeostasis, you'll hear what sounds like your own voice. Yet it is anything but you. It is we, us, this collective energy. These, what appear to be two voices, are also all the time speaking to you. Which voice you listen to will determine which voice you speak with. Initially, it appears to overlap, as mentioned in the foam party analogy discussed in Chapter 2. But with that earnest willingness and openness, one will naturally begin to tune out the other, or the others. A little story reflecting on how the story of Kelly first came upon this. After committing suicide in 2008 and landing in the emergency room on suicide watch, I now saw and heard and smelled, sensed, felt, and even tasted the experience of engaging with dead people. And as I have mentioned in previous videos, it was terrifying initially. I thought that I had damaged my brain by overdosing on medication and alcohol, and truly felt as though I had gone mad. And yet, simultaneously, I felt such a palpable, immense sense of joy, euphoria, and love like never before. What I noticed was that outweighed any illusion or fear around trusting what appeared to be mythical, magical spell-like moments. I would have called these from the other side originally, I think. It was as though I had become exposed to a world without veils. All of the past conditions and beliefs, however, were still fluttering about, as were all of the thoughts. Something began to drive this thing called Kelly, with a trust and faith that was burning from within and completely out of my control. That faith energy was far more immensely audible than the other energies appearing to float about. And so, although it seemed to all be happening simultaneously, the things that were not muted seemed to come to the forefront. So it's very similar to watching a television program and feeling like you would like a snack. And so you wait for the ads to come on, and when they do, you start running into the kitchen, and in the background the ads are still playing, but you're not really paying attention to them, even though they seem to get louder and more intense. They're just muted in the background, in the mind, which is focused on the snack, not on the muted noise. That's how I compare this to. There became what I call an energetic trust. This energy felt right. That energy did not. I began to sense it in the body, in the vessel. And the interesting debate about which to listen to slowly eroded itself as the 3D has shown time and again to be a liar. And yet this other space of energy that felt new continued to only show truth. From here, like any relationship, it began to develop, and the conversation between Kelly and the others, specifically, initially, my birth guide, Bernadette, became the clearest, most audible thing to tune into. So it became a regular understanding of which energy to trust. This did not happen overnight, y'all, nor will your experience of expansion happen overnight. You see, like all things in this dreamscape, we are only able to receive linearly until further expansion opens up for us to receive energy in wider packets. These vessels are not built to take in the complexity of energy wider, but as this unraveling begins to take hold, the spaces offered for us to do so appear to clear out. This is the clearing out phase, the unraveling. Some refer to it even as the dark night of the soul, because many of this does not feel good. It's a blend of the old energies and the new energies, and all of the characters in between dueling it out. So imagine this. Your vessel has an SD card, similar to a camera, where everything it has ever thought is stored. All past thoughts, all future visions, and all conditions and beliefs are stored on this SD card. Yet, as we often find, it has insufficient space. Compare that to a linear landscape, if you will. Yet, just like an SD card, clearing the old elements opens space for new elements. As more and more of these elements begin to dissipate or mute, the linear landscape opens up. Because our awareness filters expand, the veils become transparent until they dissipate completely. Really, it's as if we are confined in the dark, narrow cage of our own making that we take for the whole universe initially, and very few of us can even begin to imagine another dimension of mind, the mythical, the magical, the energetic explosions. I love how Patrul Rinpoche tells the story of an old frog who lived all his life in a dank well. One day the frog from the sea paid him a visit. "Where do you come from?" asked the frog in the well. "From the great ocean," he replied. "From the great ocean? How big is your ocean?" "Well, it's gigantic." "You mean about a quarter of the size of my well here?" "Bigger." "Bigger? You mean half as big?" "Nope, even bigger." "Is it as big as this well?" "There's no comparison." "That's impossible. I've got to see this for myself." So off they go together. And when the frog from the well saw the ocean, it was such a shock that his head exploded into pieces. And that's exactly what this is, you guys. It is exploding the mind, the SD card, the linear landscape. As that dissipates and becomes transmuted, transparent, the veils fall away. Everything that can be known is right here. The muted voices, the muted conversations become more audible. those you're wanting to connect with, the dead, their voices come to the forefront. Their energies come to the forefront. It's not a conjuring, it's an allowing. Now there's a space for that conversation to take place and that trust to build, and for the expansion of that trust to build. The expansion comes in trusting the guidance that begins to come through. It's a slow relationship. It's a slow earning of trust. It's a development of these conversations. It's allowing the linear to become particleized and collapse completely to the space that has always been right here. This is why I say there is no rush. The stillness and the silence does all of this. Even listening to these words in these chapters is eroding the old conditions and beliefs. Initially, though, they will feel like they're trying to share the same space, and that may feel uncomfortable. It's like two dualistic energies trying to fight for the same space. It feels like a wild stallion. So the best we can do with that energy is sit with it and welcome it. I visually see it as contrast of energies. And I programmed the vessel of Kelly to ask that contrast to come through during the unconscious sleep hours. That's a far further stretched conversation well beyond chapter 3. But what it looks like here in the story of Kelly is most of what appears to be the human day is in harmony and balance. And the God Squad is able to guide and lead, and the flow is flowing. The muted, yet still audible, energies in the background are moving through. But like ads on the TV program, nothing here is paying attention to it. As those continue to mute and evening comes forward, there's now a programmed time where contrast is allowed, where those two worlds can come together and blend. The old cookies and the cache can be deleted so that the new space can take root where the old space used to sit. I had done a video recently talking about childbirth and how when Kelly was in labor and attempting to push out the small other human being from the body and vessel of Kelly's body and vessel, there was a rocking stage. As the contractions arise, the body does all of the work, part of those autonomous systems we talk about, where the contraction pushes the muscles to move that energy. And there may be a rocking, if you will, of that little self trying to come out of that bigger body as the new energy is pushing and the old energy is pushing back. Eventually that cradle or momentum gets strong enough and the muscles, the new muscles that the body has developed in this process, pushes that energy through. There's no coincidence in the repeating mechanisms as mentioned before with Kelly and the God Squad. Each of these things begin to layer upon each other to begin to develop your own tool set, your own understanding of what communication to the other side will appear like. That SD card emptying out, that energetic space now becoming a new space for newness to come in, and that old energy and new energy coming together. All of this is happening simultaneously. But the linear mind could not take all that in, at least not initially. It's a slow erosion while the old residue lets go so that the newness can set in. The conversations I now have with my God Squad, with those on the other side, is very, very clear. But yes, the old muted sounds, thoughts, conditions, beliefs are still running in the background on the old SD card, which appears to be muted and no longer belongs or identified as mine. Again, I know this is a lot to take in, guys. I know that there's a part of you that hoped this was a 1, 2, 3, and that there was some grand psychic magic wand. But as I've mentioned in every video, the psychic piece is absolutely a natural part of this once the consciousness and awareness piece is cleared enough for that to set in. Keep strumming along, moving towards joyous life situations and heart-easing, opening, expansion situations, and by default, the rest does itself. But knowing and understanding how it works, I think, gives a little bit of understanding to the depth of how complex and miraculous this whole thing really is. Be kind with yourselves, be gentle, be patient. This really is something worth being mindful about, but not letting the mind be the master. Allow it to be the servant. That is the way it's always intended to have been. Much love. Until next time.